I am Oz, and I am an artist that lowers stress, lowers your blood pressure, and makes you joyful to come home. Quick story. I get a phone call from my insurance agent, Janet, about a year ago. She goes, "Hey, I'm going to Antarctica." I'm like, "Oh, good. Don't fall in." She goes, "No, you moron. I'm going there because it's on my bucket list, and I'm going to take a lot of pictures, and I want to send them to you so you can create your magic." I'm like, "Okay, great. Let's do it." So she goes, she comes back, sends me like 30 pictures, and I worked on them. And generally, I work on my own photos. Everything starts with my Canon Digital Rebel camera, and I work in Photoshop and PaintShop Pro and Stable Diffusion and ChatGPT, and I just coagulate it all together. But I worked on her stuff, and I worked on 8 or 10 of her photos and created a bunch of digital oil paintings for her from her original photos. And Antarctica is gray. Everything's gray. The sky is gray. The sea is gray. The water's gray. So finding color in her digital images was difficult, but I did it. So I finished it all, sent a bunch back to her. She calls me. She's losing her mind. She goes, "My God, I love it. I love everything. These colors are what I remember. It wasn't just gray." So I'm like, "Well, what do you want to do?" She goes, "Well, I want them all." I'm like, "Well, it's going to be expensive. How about you pick 3 or 4? Let's relax here." Okay. And she did. She picked 4 and decided on the size and the media. She wanted them all on metal because they pop. Send it to the lab. A week later, it's ready. And I call her, "Hey, Janet, your artwork's ready." She goes, "Oh, great. When are you bringing it by?" I'm like, I'm not bringing it by." "What do you mean?" "Well, I have homework for you." "I don't like homework. You're going to do this. You have to name all the artwork." She goes, "Oz, I'm an insurance broker. I have no creative modes in my body whatsoever. Can't you just do it?" I'm like, "No, we'll do it together." So we figured it all out. One of them was a penguin. She named it Fluffy Butt. Great name. It was very fluffy and had a big butt because it's a penguin. And it's all at the lab. Printed out certificates of authenticity. Put one on the back of each print. They're all on metal. And it had my name and her name as co-creators, which she loved. Never did that before. This was all a new process to me. So I was creating as I went. Bring it all to her office. Grab my gold marker. I signed it Oz 1 of 1. She says, "Well, what does that mean?" I said, "Well, that means it won't be on my website for sale. It won't be an NFT on OpenSea where 1,000 people can buy them. This is yours, Janet. You own this. This is exclusive to you. You took the picture. You named the artwork. Now you're going to sign your artwork." And she got very emotional. I'd never done that before either. So she signs it JN, and I'm like, "Okay, it's just like tiny. You can do better." We signed the 3rd one. We signed the 2nd one. We signed the 3rd one. I took out the 4th one, which was a 30 by 45 of this gorgeous iceberg. Okay. And I took all the color that I knew was in the sky. There was some purple, there was some blue, there was some green, dropped it into the water, and she starts to cry, Alex. And I said, "Janet, why are you crying?" And she said, "You don't understand. I'm there. Oz, I feel the cold on my face. I feel the wind in my hair. I smell the diesel from the boat's engine and the salt from the sea air as we're silently trawling, and no one is daring to speak to break this pristine silence that is Antarctica. And this is exactly what I remember. Thank you for bringing these memories back to me." And I realized in that moment that I was onto something that no other artist was doing. I was creating an emotional connection to our art. It wasn't mine. It wasn't theirs. It was our art that we were creating together because they took the photo. I created the art. They named the art. We both signed the art. The certificate says a 1 of 1. It is only theirs. They can't even have a copy if they want it. "Hey, I want one for my brother." Sorry. It's a 1 of 1. And the exclusivity of this makes it the gift for the person who already has everything, because you can't get it anywhere else. There's nobody that does exactly what I do in the way I do it. That's a piece of what I do. Obviously, you can go to my website. You can buy lots of pretty pictures there, but it won't produce the emotional connection that my custom artwork does for my clients. And then, as you well know, I do these crazy hoodies and t-shirts and leggings and sneakers and boots, and it's expanded over the 6 or 7 months that I've been doing it to the point now where I have some pretty hefty influencers that are co-branding their merch with my merch. And several of the other influencers that he knows are now contacting me, and it hasn't even hit the internet yet. So I'm pumped about what's going on right now. I'm really excited to be able to share my creative concepts with the world on a bigger scale and a bigger stage than I have been.
How did this style develop, or what's the story of Oz the artist?
It's pretty simple. I mean, I've had a camera in my hand for 40 years. I've always taken pictures. I raised my oldest daughter as a single father, and she was my model. I'd have her on tables at 3-4 months old, posing for photos. I eventually got into professional photography as a children's portrait photographer. I owned a Taste of Honey studio for 17 years. And I could honestly say that my photos of children and families hang on more walls in New York than any living photographer, because I averaged 20, 30 clients a week. And when we were a much bigger company, hundreds a week for 17 years. That's a lot of babies. And I let that kind of go down in the late 90s. We got very much into a comic book distribution. Worked with a lot of comic book companies, but I never fully put my camera down. I always took a lot of pictures. And then in the early 2000s, when digital cameras actually came down in price, where companies other than Sears or JCPenney could actually afford one, I bought my first digital. And it was amazing that I didn't have to go to a lab anymore. But there really wasn't great software to do all the post-production. And then Photoshop came out. And when Photoshop Elements came out, because they didn't have subscriptions back then, I think it was Elements 9, and I lost my mind. I mean, I would spend hours and hours and hours a day pressing buttons, had no idea what I was doing. And then one day I pressed the button and created something called an implosion, where it allowed me to take every pixel and blow it out into every direction. And I just learned then what to do with that and how to morph that. If you look, okay, if this is on audio, you're not going to see this, but if it's on video and you look there right over the American flag, that is an implosion that is morphed into what we call a crystal cave. So it really started there, and I got more and more into it, started creating a lot more strange things. And then I said at one point, I really love the outdoor photography. How can I create, these kind of digital oil paintings? And that's where Paint Shop Pro came in, utilizing that, Illustrator and Photoshop, all in combinations where I can create these beautiful digital oil paintings. And then about 3 or 4 or 5 months ago, when ChatGPT and Stable Diffusion came out, I lost my mind, because what I could do now is unlimited, even though that software is very young and is nowhere near where it needs to be to create like these perfect one-button images. You have to train it immensely with positive prompts and negative prompts. A lot of you won't know what I'm talking about, but you're telling the software specifically paragraphs long exactly what to do, and then paragraphs long exactly what not to do. And you have to do that in Stable Diffusion or all the other digital software that creates these beautiful images you see out there. It's funny, every second Saturday I get together with my friend Eric, and we basically create together. We take a piece of my art, we bring it into Stable Diffusion, create the prompts in ChatGPT, come back, create art there, and then finish it in Photoshop. It's an amazing process, and we record all of them, and they'll all be up on YouTube eventually.
I really like that you are taking all these different softwares and technologies and merging them and taking the best from each one to create the most stunning image possible. When you look at an image, are you visualizing it before, or is it a process of discovering it? When do you say, okay, this is done, right?
It's never done, because I create art from my art. I started with these implosions, which were just taking, a digital photo, blasting it with color, and then blowing that out. And then I would press other buttons and create from that, and then other buttons and create from that. And now almost everything starts with my digital oil paintings, and I create all the abstracts from those. But the process never ends. Getting back to your earlier question, when I get out and shoot photos, I'm often shooting for specific ideas. Like when I want to shoot for my clothing, I'm doing everything vertically. I'm not doing anything horizontally, so I don't have to turn it when I go into the software to create it in Printify, which goes up on Etsy. If I'm shooting for something that I know I want it to be really kind of dark and then add color in there, I'll go and I find the gnarliest dead tree that I can, and I'll take 30 or 40 photos of it from different angles so that I can make the branches and the tree completely black and then blast it with color for something similar to this, okay, that I'm wearing right now. I just love working with color, and light is so important in photography. But with the advent of Photoshop and Illustrator and everything, lighting is not as important as it used to be, because there's nothing I can't correct with digital software, nothing.
What is some advice you maybe get a new artist who would want to sell art professionally? What would you say to them?
Experiment, experiment, experiment. Make a lot of mistakes. Put everything out there. Other people's opinions of you is none of your business. Okay. Just keep creating, and don't specifically create for something that you think will sell. You're going to need to do a little bit of that in the beginning. You're going to need to play the game a little bit in the beginning. But once your name starts getting out there, people will buy just based on you being you. And it's a process that can take 15, 20 years. And if that upsets you, too bad. You know, there's comedians out there that are multimillionaires, but you didn't see them for the 15 years getting tomatoes thrown at them in clubs where they didn't want to be. Or guys like Eddie Murphy that I met when he was playing in freaking Washington Square Park. I mean, these are guys that have paid their dues, and you're only seeing them now that they've made it. So you got to pay your dues. If you're very lucky, maybe a couple of influencers will find you early in your career and put you out there to their people. That's not likely to happen to most people. It's happening to me right now, but I've been an artist for 20 years and I've been a photographer for 40. So pay your dues. There's one guy on YouTube and he's on Instagram, and he puts a black canvas down and he's got a bucket filled with all these different colors of paint with holes in it. And he swings it like a pendulum. And it just goes around a couple of times and then he stops it and the art is done. Okay. It took seconds, but the process, I'm sure, took hours to set it all up. You know, and then there's others where they just have this one woman that she puts all the colors and then she combs it and it comes down like raindrops and it's outstanding. And then there's all the standard stuff where they just, you know, they drip all the paint and all the colors on there and they're moving the canvas around until it hits every spot. And I'm just so enamored with these drip art artists because none of it is massively time consuming. Like if you watch a Bob Ross video, you know, oh, our little tree's going to live here. This little cloud's going to live here. That's time consuming and it's very personal to everybody. But I'm very taken with these drip art artists and where they've come over the last 3, 4, 5 years through COVID, where some of them have just gotten so unique and so outstanding. Someday I'll buy a few pieces, although right now I have so much art in my closet inside because I did ComicCon every year for a long time. And that last hour of ComicCon, all the artists run around and trade with each other. So I've got a pile of ComicCon art from some of the top artists. And yeah, getting frames for them, I'll be able to probably fill about 5 rooms when I buy a home. So yeah, those things inspire me.
Are there any big creative projects that you have on the horizon or that maybe you haven't been able to do yet? Any big creative vision or project that you're working on?
I think the big creative project is teaching people what Eric and I do. Create 90 minutes of content when maybe 2 segments or 3 segments, when I can get Eric to slow down his speech to get people to understand that even if you can't draw a straight line, you can be an artist. You can learn Photoshop. You can learn Creative Suites. You can learn Stable Diffusion and all these other softwares and how to bring ChatGPT in. And it can be intimidating unless you have the right people who've been doing it for a long time teaching you that this really isn't that difficult. You know, we're not going to give away all of our secrets. That's for the implementation of people that actually want to pay us for it. But we'll be giving away a good portion of it. And that's, to me, that is the next big project other than dealing with the influencers for my artware, which is going to pay a lot of bills.
Oz, really appreciate you being on the podcast. How can people connect with you, find your work, check out what you do?
There's 3 different ways, okay? Because like when people say, hey, I went to your website and I loved what I found there, but I didn't see any before and afters because I want to purchase your time and I want you to create the custom artwork for me. And I say, well, the before and afters are the photos that you're going to send because I do not charge for my time when I create for somebody. The charge is in the implementation when they want to buy the actual artwork. I say the same thing to everybody. Send me 5 photos, not thumbnails. Make sure they're photos. Make sure there's megabytes behind the JPEG thing. And I will create 2 or 3 pieces of art from each. And you'll decide if this is something that speaks to you that you want to purchase. And you know you have the before and afters because you have the original photos. There's also my website, which is ozfineartstudio.com, ozfineartstudio.com. And there's my Etsy page, which has some really great work. And I'm going to be adding more in a couple of days. And that is absolutelyartware.com, W-E-A-R, not W-A-R-E. absolutelyartware.com, or you could just go to Etsy and find me. It's Absolutely Artware. So that's some of the ways you could find me. And then, of course, I'm on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. I'm all over LinkedIn under my name, David Osterczy.
Great. Yeah, and we'll put a link down below this video in the description to make it easier to find him and connect with him. Really appreciate being on the podcast today, Oz. It was great. Thank you.